So Paul, we decided to start with that somewhat dramatic video, and I'm curious, what do you make of that? And is there a world that you see coming based on all your research that maybe some of us don't see coming?
That video was done by a 20-year-old intern at an AV company, and we were presenting to a company interface at their international sales conference about climate and drawdown. They've committed to reversing global warming as a corporation, and we were rehearsing the night before, and we had 3 segments, which is the demographics of the world, that global warming is here now. It's present. It's not something that's going to happen. And drought, fire, flood, war, famine, heat, migration. And so we were talking about that. And at that night, we were just rehearsing the segues. And then Leanne Robinson from Magic Wig said, "This intern has made this little 25-second video for you. Would you like to watch it?" And I said, "Sure." And that was it. And we were going, "Oh, what the?" And I said to Leanne, because they do the music, the segues between sections, and I said, "What were you going to follow this with?" And she said, "Oh, It's a Wonderful World with Louis Armstrong." I said, "No, I don't think that's it." And so she said, "Well, what should we do?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm going to sleep on it, and I'll figure it out in the morning." I think it's emblematic of what we saw yesterday with Alea and Adam and the students from Parkland, what we're seeing with the climate march that's student-led, March 15th, around the world, is that there is a kind of clarity, and let's just get right to the truth, that you see in youth right now that has eluded adults. And I think this is just emblematic of that.
Yeah. And I think I know as an adult, a lot of adults are disengaged from the climate crisis. It's not something that we feel necessarily like we know what to do about. And why do you feel like it's such a hard topic to get mobilization around?
There's several reasons. One is that it's really about communication and about how we've communicated to each other. And we say, well, how have we? And well, we've communicated largely about science. And the science is impeccable. The IPCC is an extraordinary organization. However, the science has been consistently about future existential threat, which is 2C in 2050 or 1.5C. Americans don't even know what a C is. They can't translate it to Fahrenheit. But nevertheless, this is what is being talked about all the time, as if something 10, 20 years, and now it's 12 years, sometimes the timing changes, out there is something bad is going to happen. And the human mind does not respond to future existential threat. You're here because your ancestors did really well responding to current existential threat. Food, security, health, warmth, clothing, habitat, etc. And so when we put that out there as a future existential threat, it is guaranteed to cause disengagement with 99.9% of the people in the world, and it has. So here we are, is in your question, which is the most gnarly, super wicked problem that civilization has ever encountered. And we understand the science very well to say that this is true. And yet somehow we've communicated in such a way that almost the entire world is disengaged. And along with that, when we do communicate about it, what we have done is communicated it in such a way that is the cause of the problem. And what I mean by that is that we've communicated climate as other. It's something else, out there, whatever. And we use war and sports metaphors. We're going to fight climate change, really? We're going to tackle it. We're going to combat it. There's a climate crusade. What an unfortunate term, if anybody's read their history. And we're going to curb it like a dog in Manhattan. We're using these words to talk about it as if it was something else instead of a miracle. Climate is a miracle. It's sacred. It's going to change every nanosecond. So to say we're going to fight change sort of makes Don Quixote look like a pragmatist, really. Like, good thinking. And so, but the thinking that informs that is really making something that is integral to our being, to our wealth, the true wealth, to our nature as something that's external to it. And I'm saying that is the mindset that created the problem.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. I know that Einstein has that quote that says you cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. Yes. And so it feels like there's this consciousness part in terms of like us as a species growing, and it's not so much like even if we had the right technological fix, that doesn't take away the lessons that we need to learn. And I would love for you to speak to a little bit about what is it that you feel humanity needs to learn that would allow us to address climate from a different perspective?
It's prepositional. And Byron Katie has mentioned this, I think, probably on the stage in prior Wisdoms 2.0s, but it's the difference between 2 and 4. And the way climate is communicated, or global warming is communicated to us, is happening to us. And as soon as you use the word "to," you're the victim, you're the object. Something else is doing something to you, and then you act or react out of that sense of objectification. I didn't do it, it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my idea, it wasn't in my plan, I'm not the one who caused, et cetera, et cetera. And when you change that preposition to "for," it's actually happening for us. Climate change is a gift.
Wow.
It's a gift. It's a blessing. And it's a blessing because it's feedback. And any system that ignores feedback, including you, and when your body has feedback, suffers or dies.
Wow.
And so global warming actually is an invitation to create a transformed, extraordinary world.
Wow.
And that gate is wide open. And when we see ourselves as victims, then we're looking 180 degrees in the opposite direction from the possibility. We keep talking about the probability of what's going to happen instead of the possibilities. Every problem is a solution in disguise by definition. That is what a problem is. Right?
Yeah.
And so the greatest problem we've ever faced as a civilization is laden with a plethora of brilliant solutions. And what we're not seeing is how brilliant humankind is, that it is addressing it, that it is on the case, that it knows what to do. And this is obscured by the way we're communicating to each other about it, as if we should go into despair.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So when you see effort, we can clap. When you see efforts like the Green New Deal that's arising from Alexandria and others, do you get excited about that? Do you see that as part of the answer? How do you move forward in a way that you feel like that right learning is happening?
I'd love the spunk and gumption of the Green New Deal and the Sunrise Movement, and AOC, and Senator Markey and others. I love that. It's just as a, I'm a 6. I think, but how do you get from here to there? Practically speaking, and the first thing you don't do is make an enemy and blame people. And I feel like that is, the greedy fossil fuel companies, and this and that, all that sort of stuff. Those feelings are understandable, but they're not helpful. And the way we're going to do this is by coming together, not by separation, by dividing, by demonization. It's not going to work. And so I think when we write a Green New Deal, we have to write it with a sense of openness and open arms. And there's a beautiful word, Aboriginal word called dadiri. And dadiri means the sacred, respectful listening with your heart to another person. And that's what we have to do, is listen. Somebody asked me once, it said, I gave a talk and they seized the microphone in Q&A and said, oh, this is all very good, but what do you say to the NASCAR people? Huh? You're like, huh? What do you say to them? Because they don't buy this. I said, what would I say to the NASCAR people? I would ask them whether they favored Kyle Busch or Chase Elliott for the championship. Right? And because I don't know who I'm talking to. And the only way I can find out is to ask. And to inquire and to listen with my heart and being as to what matters to them. And unless we do that, and that's what I fear about the Green New Deal, is that the spunk is beautiful, but also I feel like it's a little too spunky. In a sense
or it's not inclusive enough in terms of the different people at the table that need to be brought in. And I know that you have the very, because of your book Drawdown and your work, you have an opportunity to be able to speak with heads of CEOs and global leaders. And I'm curious, how are they thinking about this when you're speaking to them? Do they see that there's a problem? Do they want to address it when you're? Because I think part of the frustration of the younger people is they feel like the energy companies aren't willing to come to the table, that they're not willing to be a part of the solution, and so they feel like they have to fight and kind of knock down a barrier there because.
Well, I wish there was a they there, because you said, well, how do they, how do they respond? Each one is so different. Most responsible corporations in the world are taking extraordinary measures right now. I feel like there is something happening right now. Maybe I think all of us can feel it in some way, but there seems like the penny has dropped finally, in terms of recognition and understanding that this is serious. It's been serious for 45 years, but it really wasn't taken up on an institutional basis, whether it's corporations or governments. And I just feel very rapidly now a difference. An example is that Sir Jonathan Porritt, who worked with Prince Charles for years, is an advisor to Drawdown and a friend. And he was debating Sir Michael Gove, who is the Minister of the Environment under Theresa May in the Conservative government. And they were debating on TV. And out of nowhere, Michael Gove pulls out the English edition of Drawdown and says, this is my roadmap. And Jonathan said, I fell off my chair in mirth, because it's like, and yet the very fact that it's a document that's permeable in that way. The book has an underlying sort of ethos, and that ethos is it should name the problem and the solution on the cover, number one. Number two, it shouldn't divide. Number three, there's no fear, threat, doom, shame, or blame in the book whatsoever. Number four, we never say we're right, because as soon as you're right, you make somebody wrong. And we weren't interested in that. And the thing is, there's no advocacy in the book. We talk about the 100 solutions that are the top solutions to reverse global warming, and that we can do it in 30 years. And they're scaling, they're in place, we know how to do it, it's not fantasy. But we do not advocate, there's no ought, there's no should, which is kind of a subtle way to guilt trip people. Right? Or not so subtle. And so we create narratives, and what we try to do is create spaciousness about possibility. So that when you go in, you go, wow, who knew? Didn't know. First solar panel, 1884, New York City, And they were debating then with Thomas Edison and so forth about coal-fired plants and which would win, coal or solar. And we could say solar won. It just took a while. And so to create stories around possibility and human imagination and ingenuity is really what we move towards. We move towards that. We don't move towards probability. We move towards possibility. And so that's really what is our task at hand. And that task at hand means to come together. And that's why Drawdown itself was created by 200 people. It was a collaborative. There's no sage on the stage. There's nobody who says, listen up, I've got the answer. We didn't do that. We said, we work together. And what we did is reflect back to humanity what it's doing and what it knows. Say, this is you, you're beautiful, you're extraordinary. And you wouldn't get that reading the media. You know, but it's true anyway.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. I love how you balance the science and the reality of that with the spiritual orientation, and I think that, to me, is such a beautiful combination. And I'm wondering, because you spend so much of your time studying the latest research, the science, which is not a lot of good news.
No.
How do you keep your heart open? How do you stay joyful? How do you stay appreciative? How do you continue to have an open heart when part of your work is studying about the latest research, understanding what's happening in the world, which often doesn't have a positive, there's not a positive things you're reading every day?
Honestly, when I was backstage and saw the video, I started to tear up. So I don't have any particular shield or sense that surpasses the grief and the loss that we see and will see. And I do make a rule not to read anything after 4 p.m. about the science. I don't take it to bed. Can you imagine uninhabitable Earth? Oh, nighttime reading, or the end of ice. Fantastic. What's the page turner? So I read that stuff in the morning, and the RSS feeds and so forth. But I feel like we've had we talked about loss on stage, and my wife Jasmine and I have had a loss in our family, her father, and it's just riven us with grief and loss, hers 100 times greater than mine. And I feel like, and it's been spoken, that the grief is like, trying to find where to go. A place to go. And so I feel like the taking that in is really, really important, because to feel that, and sense of loss, but it also is it's really the root, the core of how we arise and love the world. And I ask students sometimes, it sounds so, for me to say it's easy, but say, look, you're all going to die. So think about that moment, and then now work backwards. And given what you know about global warming and climate, why are you here? Why did you come? What do you want to do? And I feel like, again, with what you asked earlier about the climate movement and inaction, is that we have actually sort of misplaced our understanding of how it is that we can reverse global warming, and it is actually about really addressing current human needs. That's how we do it. And listen, we're the only species without full employment. Think about that. There's 10 million other species, and they're all working all day or night, depending. And no ant turns to another ant and says, we don't really need you, And yet somehow we've created a system in which we tell people they have no value, and then they act it out, and then we create the industrial prison complex to make money off the fact that we are marginalizing human beings, And yet, never has there been so many people unemployed in the world as there is today. and doing things that are really, from my point of view, just ridiculous and demeaning as employment, and never have so many people needed so much as right now. And you look at that one, and you look at that one, and the way to reverse global warming is to connect those two together and to use intergenerational financing as a way to really fund the regeneration of the world on all levels, both on forest and land and sea, but also habitat and health and education and equality and gender and so forth. This is what lies before us, which is really, it's right in front of our nose, you know, is really, let's address human need with compassion, with heart, with love, with ingenuity, and we will absolutely change the atmosphere and reverse global warming.
Because we've changed ourselves.
Changed ourselves, and the only way we can address our human needs is through techniques and technologies and practices that actually reduce our impact and actually sequester carbon.
Yeah, but it seems like our system, though, is based very much on an us and them. So us are the people who try to succeed. The thems go to prisons and jails and other places.
Right.
And that there's this orientation that's like, oh, if I survive, screw the rest of you.
Yeah.
And that can't happen, and us address the environment.
That's the messaging we're all getting. We're in, you know, Tristan and Jack are going to be here on the stage next. You know, the messaging we're getting is to even hyper-individuate ourselves.
Right.
Right. And this hijacking of our mind to give us, to creates a sense that we're separate, that we're other, that we have to be. I mean, everybody's spoken about it in one way or the other here, and yet I do feel like the sort of the arising of global warming, you know, and that video you saw shows what's happening now, not what's going to happen, and I think as more and more people really come together and understand, you know, that you know, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety but connection, you know, and that we're addicted to a world that doesn't serve our interests, you know, and the only thing that does is to reconnect, and I don't mean on our smartphones, I mean truly like we're doing here at Wisdom 2.0.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we just have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
What would you like to leave us with?
Oh, well, how many people have seen The Martian, the Matt Damon movie? And you probably all know the plot anyway, you know. And I think about it because the Andy Weir, that movie was about the Earth. It was an allegory. I don't know if it was that was clear. And so he's marooned on Mars and he's got this little dome bubble, and he's growing potatoes in his own poop, right? But what it is a closed system, and the input is sunlight, and this is a closed system. This beautiful turtle island called Earth is a closed system, and the only input is sunlight. This is exactly the same. And then in the middle of that, you know, the thing blows up. He loses his atmosphere, and he has to get out of there, okay? But the end of the movie really is Andy Weir talking to us, and that's when Matt Damon, you know,
Andy Weir's the producer or the director?
He's a writer.
The writer.
He wrote the book. And at the end of the movie, he's talking to wannabe astronauts. You know, he's the Amanat Gri, and and he came back. Spoiler alert, he came back, okay. And he says, pay attention, because this could save your life. When I was up there, did I think I was going to die? Absolutely. This is space. It does not cooperate. This is the atmosphere. It does not cooperate. Okay. And then what he says next is, you know, listen up. You know, at some point, everything's going to go south on you. And you think, this is it. This is the end. And you can either accept that, or you can go to work. You do the math. You solve one problem, you solve another problem, and if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Wow.
And that's what we're talking about here, is let's do the math, let's figure it out, let's solve the problems,
And
the
let's reach
solutions,
out to each other in a new way.
and let's come home, and come home to our true nature, to our heart, to our community, to the ones we love, to the ones we don't know, and to this beautiful place, a miracle we call Earth. And that's what Andy was saying to us, that's what the Martians, and that's what I think global warming is trying to tell us as well. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul Hawken, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.